Welcome into another episode of the Player Card Show. I am your host, Chris Gorez, and today I am at the St. James in Springfield, Virginia, and I'm joined by Doug Homer. Doug is the senior sports business development. Say it yourself.
Senior Director for Sports Business Development.
Senior Director for Sports Business Development. That's Doug Homer, and he's going to be joining me in this conversation as we talk a little bit about what we do to help families own their own journey in the recruiting process. So, Doug, thanks for joining us today.
Of course, nice to be with you.
And I apologize for that fumble. I know we went over it, and then we talked a little bit about that, but
okay.
We're in it. We're rolling.
We're good.
Yeah. So, Doug, how long have you been here with the St. James?
So I started with St. James in late 2017, and this is going into my 9th year, more or less, if you think about it in those terms. It's been an interesting journey, a long journey within sports, business, people, processes, you name it. It's been a lot of fun, a lot of challenges, particularly when COVID came along, but things are good. Things are really good.
So before I start to ask you some questions about the process for families, talk a little bit about what your role is here as the Senior Director of Sports Business Development.
Yeah, my role is kind of threefold. One is to work with our sports directors to help them plan their business, to think about strategically where they want to go and how they're going to get there. And then I help them execute that plan, from developing customers to retaining customers, thinking about partners, thinking about ways in which their product can speak for itself, but thinking also about how to get outside that box and seek out opportunities for their brand to be more recognized in the market.
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of that. I work with our Performance Academy, which is a sports conservatory for middle school, high school, and postgraduate student athletes. That's a very comprehensive program that we've been involved with now for the past 2 years. And I do everything there from recruiting to admissions to business development, contracts, you name it, parent relations, etc. And then I think the other part of my job that's a lot of fun is building relationships within the public and private sectors. So I have meetings and take meetings with people that are interested in collaborating with the St. James in one form or another. Might be within the St. James ecosphere, could be with one of our sub-properties or brands, and just thinking about ways in which we can work together and maximize the opportunity for the end user, which ultimately is either an adult or a youth that really wants to get somewhere and be healthy at the end of it.
So awesome. Well, one of those collaborations and partnerships is with the Player Card website, right? So one of the things that we always talk about is the ownership of your own journey. Right. If you want to get to the next level, whatever that level may be, there's a lot that you have to do. Right. And a company like the St. James, there's a lot that you provide, but then there's also a lot that the families still have to do on their own. Mm-hmm. Right. So, and I'm sure that this landscape has changed since 2017 when you took over. In those 9 years, the transfer portal, NIL has happened. Talk a little bit about the changes that you've seen from the beginning to where we are now in a high school's recruitment journey.
Boy, that's a pretty broad question. I will say, when I first started in the role here, I was not in business development. I was the director of soccer. So my role was to build our portfolio in soccer.
Got it.
And to do so, I looked outside of the market. I looked at best practices in development when it comes to players, coaches, fans, and of course families. And I was looking at models across the world to try to understand what's missing, what's absent from here in the Washington, D.C. area when it comes to player development for soccer. And one of the things that I felt was necessary was to create a club agnostic training environment. A center of excellence, if you will, where players can come and have an individual approach to development outside of being on a team.
I love that.
And to give them a holistic approach as a part of that, but also to make sure that their parents understood essentially what they're buying. And I think that's one of the things that really hasn't changed much, even in the last 10 years, Chris. I think what happens is in my opinion, when your child joins a club, whether they join at 2 or they join at 12, there should be an expectation that the club should explain to you, here's what we're going to teach, here are the milestones that we're going to aim to achieve, and if we don't achieve them, here are the support mechanisms that you as a parent can expect from us. Kind of like what you might see when your child is at school. You don't enter into a school year without a syllabus, and you certainly don't get evaluated without performance throughout the year. Your teachers are responsible, and so are you as the student. I think when it comes to youth sports, there's a little too much emphasis on what the coach is going to do.
I love that.
Versus what the program is set out to do, and the environment together with the coach, with the parent, with the player collectively can achieve at the end of that school year or sports year. I don't think clubs are willing to make that type of forward investment in terms of saying to you as a parent, these are the benchmarks for success. Here's what it should look like by age. Here's what it should look like by talent level. And let's try to develop your son or daughter on that pathway. That for me was one of the motivations for why I felt like we should do something along those lines here at the St. James back in 2017. Thus, what we created was a center of excellence in that regard. I don't think the market was ready for it, frankly. And I think we made some mistakes along the way. But ultimately, what I think we did achieve was that we were able to do things that everybody was afraid to do. And by doing so, of course, there were targets put on our back.
Sure.
Our competitors didn't like what we were doing, and they would sort of talk negatively about us. That's just the way it is, in particularly in a competitive open market like we are in. But as we evolved, I think our soccer program particularly was able to take steps in a positive direction. We were able to move from being just a grassroots club to a nationally recognized club. We had the right people in place. We had the right philosophy in place. And we committed to that, and we made sure that was a swinging fulcrum, if you will, a way for a parent and a child to sort of say, this is what I'm into, and this is why I'm into it. And here's my coach that's part of that process. Here's my performance coach like you that's part of that process. Here's someone that I can talk to when I have some issues, whether it's emotionally or mentally or both, and trying to provide a holistic approach to that. I think that's what we did, and we did really well. But recruiting back then to where it is today is completely different.
Yeah.
Absolutely completely different.
Right.
It doesn't look the same. It doesn't feel the same. I don't even think you can use some of the acronyms today that back then no one would even know what you meant by NIL.
Right.
No idea
That's
what
right.
that means. What is that?
That's right.
Is that a band? Is that, what is that? So I think there's a lot of changes, but I hope that helps kind of unpack a little bit.
That does. I think that the player development still is true, right? That's never going to change because the pillars of development are always going to be there, right? There's especially when you're taking that holistic approach. Are you developing as a player on the field? Are you developing as a person off the field? Are you developing athletically? Because there are performance benchmarks that you do need to hit if you want to play on a certain level. It's just those things are just true.
Yeah.
Right. We can sit here and say, oh, I wish it wasn't that way or it shouldn't be that way, but it is that way. Right. And I deal with it a lot for every kid that I see that, oh, well, they're taking the kid that's 6 foot instead of me, but I'm a better player. Yeah, but you're 5'6". Like we can't change that.
Right.
So the way that you can change that is to be super fast, super strong. You have to be athletically gifted enough or teams are just not going to look at you, right? And that's something that the St. James has done is you've invested in performance training. And I love that you say it's an individual approach. This isn't just a cookie cutter. Everybody does the same workout. Everybody has the same plan. Talk a little bit about how do you individualize that for your athletes?
Yeah, I think the best way to answer that question is trying to understand what someone's goals and motivations are. Differ by age, differ by the level of maturity that young person has. You can't necessarily do an individualized training plan for a 6 or 7 year old.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're just not ready for that. Yeah. And frankly, like if we're doing that for them at that age, then we're doing them a disservice.
Yeah, that's where it becomes, I feel like, a little bit of a grift, right? It's like we're selling individualized programs to 7, 8 year olds. Like that's I need it at all.
No, I mean, show me a young man or young lady that was signed to a contract at 9. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that happens, then I think we're in a whole different world.
Yeah.
Hopefully that never happens. But when I talk about individual development, what I'm saying is about the age 13, 14, where you're going through puberty, you're starting to really think about what you want to achieve, how you want to get there. You have all these questions that you have about your body, and more importantly, how are you going to develop your mind? How are you going to develop your intelligence to be able to perform at a level that you think you can reach? And I think combining that is really important, because a lot of the benchmarks, a lot of times, beyond just how fast, strong, or quick you are how quickly you can process and read the game.
Right.
And the game could be anything. It could be basketball, it could be soccer, it could be football, you name it, right? So thinking through that then means defining what you're going to do with that young person to help them develop the confidence, as well as the skill set, as well as the physical tools and battery that need to support the whole athlete. And I like to think of a student athlete in a different way than we just talk about a player, because I think the scholastic part of learning is the biggest part that we undervalue when it comes to sport in young players. We identify them as athletes, but we forget they go to school during the day.
That's right.
But when they leave school, that doesn't mean that the learning stops. So the learning environment should incorporate benchmarks where you can see improvement. And when you can see improvement, you can talk about improvement. You can recognize improvement. You can praise that young person for reaching that level of improvement. And you can also then relate that back to the parent. Parents like to hear feedback.
Sure.
Sometimes they don't want to hear the bad feedback. Sometimes they don't want to hear the, sort of deconstructing feedback, right? But that's a loop that you have to be willing to take. And sure, it can be uncomfortable at times to be able to talk to a parent openly and frankly, hear their understanding of what you're saying and let them repeat that back to you. And at times that might not be very comfortable for you as the coach or the leader. But if you don't do that, I think you're doing a disservice to the young person you're working with.
I agree. One of the you're unpacking a lot here, and there's a lot that I want to circle back to. But on the topic of being frank with parents and being frank with families, one of the things that we run into is everybody thinks that they're going to be a Division I P4 player. Everybody thinks that they're good enough to be on the national team. If coach would have just seen it this way, I would have been a national team player. Probably not. What are some of the things that you can point to make it less personal and make it more objective? Say, hey, these are the benchmarks that we look at, and this is what tells me you're good enough to play on this level. This is what we're looking at that shows us, hey, maybe this is the level you should be looking at.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I would say, it kind of goes back to what are the talent qualities that your club feels they can help cultivate in young players, young student athletes. In soccer in particular, sure, you want to have a player that's technical, that has insight tactically, that sort of carries themselves mentally, has composure, can handle tough as well as easy situations. But by identifying what some of those qualities are that you're looking for in your athletes to develop, then you can start to measure that against the competition. Could every club learn from the types of metrics that, say, Anson Dorrance takes every year, when he was at UNC with his women's team? Of course, you could try that, but that's his culture and that's their way of doing things, and it's been successful. So it becomes sort of a tradition. I think it's really hard to not acknowledge what the performance metrics are, but also to think about, well, what's the performance of this in addition to the rest of the body? And when you're playing a sport, whether you're learning how to hit a baseball or you're throwing a football or you're catching a ball in general, there are different motor receptions and neurons and things that are going on in the brain that you have to think about training just as much as the physical part of the body.
Yeah.
So I think as we think about, are we seeing development in those areas, or is there a reason we're not? Then we can then compare that data set to what it looks like if you are at a national team level, or you're in a Division I college program, or you're aspiring professional player, because as working with professional athletes,
that's right,
what their threshold is very different from a high school player who thinks that they can do this day in, day out, for 9 months of the year and not burn out, or not reach an injury, or not feel like they don't want to do this anymore mentally because of all the other things that they're dealing with in their lives. We don't deal with that, I think, when it comes into youth sports, because why do teams exist? Do they exist because players love the game and they want to continue to compete? Yes, but here in this country, everybody competes to win. Mm-hmm. And so the winning part of it becomes greater than the process. And the end result is measured on how many times did you win? Did you win the championship? Did you get promoted?
Right.
Are there television deals for youth soccer? Not that I've seen. Are there sponsorship deals for youth soccer?
No.
Not that I've seen. So, what are we promoting, and also how are we measuring success? And I think those are key things to really be thinking about when you're looking at how do you help each child reach their full potential? What motivates you is different from what motivates me.
Absolutely.
What motivates others, and that has to be taken into account.
Absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned a lot there with especially the difference between professionals and youth athletes and what that gap really is. I think there's certainly talent. Don't let me misplace this conversation. I'm not saying that hard work and dedication is all you need. You also need talent, right? But you if you're not talented enough, then this conversation is mute. So sometimes you get into these conversations with parents where, your kids have done all the right things. They're great kids. They have developed. They are learning. They are getting better. There's still a talent gap, right? You still have to have that. Yeah. But the processing speed is one thing that I think is fascinating. So for people like myself, or people like Mateus, who we were talking about, shout out to Mateus Manoa, who's the performance director here. We do a lot to try to close that gap, because 20 years ago when I started this, 20 years is a long time for me to be in this field. 20 years ago when I started this field, if you would have asked me, can you teach somebody to be fast? I would have said, no, you're either fast or you're not. Now we know with science that we know better. We can make somebody fast. Mm-hmm. And now it's all about that processing speed.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Because people say, they just have the instincts or they don't. Well, we know better now. We know that we're on that edge of being able to develop those instincts. So I love that you guys are doing that for the players, because I think that's something that a lot of coaches and a lot of programs will just throw up their hands and say, this player has it, this player doesn't have it. No, we're going to identify what those gaps are and try to work on those, right? So going into more of that development, how much of it is on the player and the families themselves as individuals, and how much of it is on the coaches and the teams and the framework of the team structure?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I'll ask you this way, right? So there's a problem when somebody signs up for the St. James and they say, hey, I want to come here because I believe the St. James is going to get me to where I want to go. I want to go play college soccer. I want to go play college football.
Right.
Like, okay, there's a lot that we can do for you. There's things in-house. We're going to take a holistic approach to development. We're going to do athletic training. We're going to work on your education as a student athlete, but there's still your part. So in your mind, what is the St. James's part and the role that they play, and then the part that player and that family still has to play to do for themselves?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say if you don't look at it, in my opinion, if you don't look at it from a 360-degree perspective, you forget that the training that you're doing, physical training, needs to be complemented by what you're doing to recover mentally and physically, and also taking into account that just 1 or 2 sessions a week is probably not going to get you to that level that you think you're going to reach. The kids that I've worked with over my career, I've been doing this almost 40 years, the ones that really love it and are willing to be out there when no one else wants to be, whether that means it's, a cold, snowy day like we just had a day or two ago, to when it's hot and muggy and it's 100 degrees.
That was all in the same day, by the way.
That was, right? How unique is that? But how many kids will say, I'm going to be out there no matter what, that there's something I can be doing today that the best players are doing just like I want to be. And that might mean they're taking time for their inside, for their heart and their soul and their mind, their mindset, versus just the physical part or the technical part. Those kids, I think, are the ones that have a great story to tell. Their life experience reveals itself through their character, and coaches love those types of athletes. They're highly sought after because they make a difference in the lives of other people. They bring out qualities in other people that you yourself as a coach may have a tough time motivating. And those types of athletes are tough to find, Chris. I kind of look at them like the 2-3 percenters. There's 97 to 98% of good players, and there's 2 to 3% who are great. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the fastest, the strongest, or the quickest, but they might be the best connectors to other people to bring out their talents and qualities. And I think, if you're that type of young person, and you put a picture up on the wall of your favorite athlete, and underneath of it you write, I'm going to be in the whatever that is, the NBA, the NFL, Major League Soccer, you name it, and you believe that that's what you want to be, and you're pushing yourself to that, then of course you need days off. Your body needs to recover, and so does your mind. But you might be that athlete that possesses those qualities mentally and physically, that when someone meets you for the first time, that impression that you've left on them is so indelible that they say to their colleagues that they're coaching with or working with, say, have you met that young man, Chris?
Yeah.
He's remarkable. What makes them say that? It's not just the athletic piece.
Absolutely.
It's the whole person piece of it.
That's right.
And I think if we think of it that way, sure, those are tough pieces to find. And if you do find a young person like that, you're going to try to hold on to them for the best reasons. But you're also going to let them go too when it's time to let them go, because their environment may not be as stimulating as what they really need. And I've worked with kids like that. I'm sure you have too.
Yep.
And when we see them go on to greater heights, having when they express gratitude and they see you as part of their journey, there's nothing better.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. That's one of the most rewarding feelings when they acknowledge or give thanks or appreciation for your part, right? And it's a small part that we play, but it's their journey. We were there for a small portion of it, but to get that recognition, it's definitely part of the reward. And I wanted to go into that because you're talking about kids who develop a love for the game, right? Like there's something about that is very hard to develop. That is one of those things that's like, hey, you got to have this, right? But being the senior director of sports business development, youth sports business has blown up a lot over even just the past 5 years. I've seen this in companies like the St. James, and there's companies all over this country where youth sports has become a business. As the senior director of sports business development, how do you protect the purity of sports so that a kid can love that sport and it doesn't become a business for a 14 or 15-year-old?
Yes, it's a really good question. How you define purity, that's a tough question for each individual athlete. I don't think that kids think of purity in the same ways that we do. They are emotionally wired differently than you and I. Their brains are still developing, or I think ours are pretty much developed, unless we're pushing ourselves each day. We are. But that's a really interesting question to think about. The continuum, right?
Yeah.
Is when you think about, at least I do, when I think about what I'm going to deliver today in terms of a lesson, that's a training plan. Can I make it meaningful enough that each player that's with me for the period of time that I'm with them understands the purpose of it, understands the actions to take during it, and can think through that and make independent decisions themselves without me joysticking them.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
And giving them the confidence both to succeed and to recognize when it didn't work out, what did you learn from it? And I think more of an emphasis on that type of learning environment and having that freedom to be able to talk to your players like that and your players to give you that feedback is really important, because that's what feeds the continuum.
Yes.
That's what keeps them feeling like this is a place where my coach understands me and I feel like I can be at my best. And even if I'm having a tough day and they see it, I can be vulnerable just as much as we need to be vulnerable as their coaches and their teachers. That, I think, lends itself to retaining your customers, promoting that type of learning environment, and giving them an opportunity to help you shape the next phase of that training or that team experience.
I love that. So let's ask that same question for parents, right? Because parents are going to be heavily involved, especially when we're talking about esports, because some of these 14, 15-year-old kids, they're not ready to be self-sustaining adults, right? There are very few of them. So the parents are very involved. And it's a sports business decision for them as a family as well, right? They're investing a lot of money to be at a place like this, or to be at a school, or to go to their training and all this. And a lot of parents are going to say, hey, where's my money going, right? I'm investing all this money. Where is my return on this investment, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's a hard conversation to say, hey, like, we got to allow these kids to have some freedom. I know you're looking for the structure and the rewards, and this is what you paid and this is what you get. Talk to the parents a little bit now about allowing that kid to fail, allowing that kid to have the freedom to fail, and not making it all about the results all the time.
Yeah, I can relate it to my upbringing. My dad was a very successful athlete, and not once did he tell me that I needed to follow in his footsteps. He didn't play the sports that I eventually played. I started playing soccer when I was 5. He was a hockey player. He played baseball. We never played those sports together. And when I was playing soccer, my dad never asked me about the game after it was over. He might say, hey, do you want to go get an ice cream or a slice of pizza? And we just had, I guess you could say, everyday conversation. And that, to me, was really important, because I didn't feel like my dad wanted me to be like him or tell me that I needed to follow in his footsteps. He just supported me in what I was trying to learn and do. And I look back at that and I give my dad a lot of credit for that, because I grew up in a much different time than what kids are growing up in today's world. And I think, to some extent, to answer your question about return on investment, you could pay for any program you want. You can go on the internet. You can use your phone to find a trainer. You can find an expert coach. You can find the best club in the world. But you got to ask yourself, is that the environment that's best suited for me as a young person, and for my child as well? And what are you buying at the end of the day? Ask those questions when you first go into that environment. And if the people who are in that environment can't articulate that, they cannot tell you what the end of this looks like, to me, that's a red flag. And so I think it's incumbent upon us as operators to make sure that we can articulate that, we can provide that information, and we can walk the parent through it as we're doing it together. Will we see measurable gains every single session? Yes or no? But I don't know how you measure some of that. That's within someone's head. That's hard to do. You can see it from a data perspective with all the different data tools that we use nowadays, to incorporating that into performance analysis and the science of sports. We have people like Mateus, as you talked about, and others that do that for our athletes. So that is very digestible, and that should help you understand: are we close to goal? Are we off goal? Are we off pace? What do we need to do to adjust? But when I think about like the total return on investment and how I would feel if my own child was a part of a program, and I have a son who was an academy soccer player. He's now a professional soccer player in Europe. Did it always work out for him? No. Was there a feedback loop? Not really, to be honest with you. Was there ever feedback to me as a parent? Seldom, very seldom. Do I feel like there was return on investment for the time spent with him? Yeah, I think there was, because he did matriculate from that academy into college and moved on from college into pros. But I don't think he would look back at that and say to me, you know what, Dad, thanks for spending that $2,000 or $3,000 each year. I don't think he would look at it like that, Chris.
Yeah.
I think he would say, did I play good competition during my time? Yes. Did I enjoy my training sessions? Most of the time. Was it accessible? Yeah, it was accessible. Were there good people that I met along the journey? No question. But for me, like, to measure all that after so many years of paying for it, it's a tough one. It's a real tough one, because I think it was more about what he wanted to achieve than what I would want him to achieve. Now, not every parent thinks about it like that, right? I'm sure you might have differing opinion to that, and so would your colleagues and other parents watching this. But I think you have to look at the club's environment and the commitment that they're willing to make to you to help you understand what are the talent qualities that they believe that they can raise in each player from year to year, and what does that look like? Is it systematic? Is it by age band? Does it change? Does it change by the level of competition they play? Those are the types of questions that I would ask, and I would encourage parents to do that when they're going to these tryouts or ID sessions, to have a conversation with a coach if they're willing to have that conversation with you.
Yeah.
A lot of times they won't. Right. But if a technical director or a director of football is in front of you and you ask that question, you should hope to get that answer.
Yeah, you're giving some really good answers, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think that there's a lot of parents out there that would have a lot more questions, so I'm gonna ask these questions on the parents' behalf.
Sure.
Right. So this isn't necessarily coming from me, but this is just, I know what parents have expressed to me and what their concerns are. Right. Because right now it's all about, especially with NIL. Every parent thinks that my kid is going to go to college, my kid is going to get this huge NIL deal, this and that, right? And to me, there's still so much value in education. You still have to go to school to be a student athlete, as you said, right? So how do you either calm the nerves or reset the expectations of somebody who wants to come to the St. James and play football here, because from here they're going to go to Georgia and get an NIL deal, then go to the NFL from there? Like, what are the conversations that you have with those types of parents?
Well, I'm not qualified to have those conversations, so I don't typically have that conversation. I stay in my lane, and I know that it's appropriate for a football coach to have a football conversation, for a baseball coach to have a baseball conversation. Where I think we can help is helping families understand the complexity of the NIL landscape. From a legal, from a business,
I love that. Yes.
From a tax perspective as well.
Yes.
Because the minute that you start accepting payment, you are now an employee.
That's right.
Or you're a consultant, or one and the same. And your child is no longer an amateur. The minute that you start being paid for your time and your services, you are a professional. You may not look at it like that, but Uncle Sam does.
That's right.
And so you have to surround yourself with people that can advise you and help you take the right steps. Of course, you're going to pay for their services as part of that. So that does have an impact on what you think your value is in terms of NIL itself. Let's look at it like this. NIL is a marketplace, just like if I went to the stock exchange and I wanted to buy frozen concentrated orange juice. Right? There are people that sell it and there are people that buy it. It's a commodity. So the value of that commodity changes every single day. A player's value may change depending on whether or not they have great performances in certain events, they get injured, certain life events present themselves, et cetera, et cetera. So how you negotiate that depends upon the people that you surround yourself with, who you feel understand you and can trust that you're putting the right trust in them, and they're putting the right product and giving you an opportunity to really move forward in that process, whatever that means. So for me, to be honest, Chris, like I don't deal with the NIL sector.
Gotcha.
That is something that is in play, I think, within the leadership within our company and also with the different sport directors who are helping families navigate that. We will have student athletes here that will progress through our academy and move on to play at various colleges and universities and have NIL deals. I have not personally seen one yet that has been through the St. James Performance Academy. Does that mean that day is coming soon? Yes, I think it is.
Yeah.
But I think it's a very complex area. And the more education that you can do as a parent, the better. The more informed you can be by talking to people who do that for a living every day, by all means, please, pursue that. Because again, the minute that you decide to go into that direction and you do have your NIL deal on the table from such and such college or university, they're looking for return on investment and what they're going to pay your son or daughter.
100%.
But you got to have the right people to support that, because your son or daughter is going to have to be a student and an athlete. In addition, also fulfill the obligations of those contracts.
That's right.
So I don't think I can get too deep into that, because that's just not what I.
No, that's a fair assessment. One of the other things that we're talking about is there's been a lot of chatter about data, right? Performance data, metrics. Two-part question. When does that all matter, right? Because we agree that doesn't matter for a 6 or 7 year old, right? We're not going to measure your force data at 7 years old. That's not going to help us, right? So when does that start to matter? And then how do you make the main thing, right? So because there's so much out there, right? You could go to in-game stats and say, hey, this is what matters. We need to see how many points you're scoring, how many passes you're connecting. Is it the performance metrics? Is it the GPA? Is it SAT scores, right? Like, in your mind, what are some of the metrics that pop out at you? So that's the first question. And the second question is, when does that actually matter?
Wow. Well, I can only talk about it from the sports that I know pretty well. And so when I look at it from a soccer player's perspective, there are data sets that you can see that come to bear when you're dealing with athletes. You're looking at a female athlete differently than you do a male athlete.
Right.
When I look at some of the data that some of the young ladies that I work with will share with me, whether it's from the video that I get that may have some of that attributed to it, or some of the data that's collected when they wear their GPS trackers.
Right.
What I'm looking for is sometimes it's as simple as how many accelerations and decels did they have in a particular match for the position that they play. Was it specific to one direction versus multiple directions? Right. What's the force on their body and the load that they're taking on? I'm not necessarily looking at how much distance they covered,
sure,
but the overall stress that they've been under, because that might help explain why they are the way they are and where they are in their overall periodization. Think about periodization maybe in quarterly basis, right? We're in the third quarter of the school year right now. Yeah. So where they are in that relation to where they should be has a lot to do with what's going on in their lives day to day.
Sure.
And so when you take data like that, the numbers tell a little bit of the story, but you got to dive into that in terms of how the person feels.
Yeah.
And so for me, those are conversations that I like to have with the young person, even when looking at the video or looking at the data, because then they can explain to me what was really going on.
Yeah,
I can't make that inference. I can sort of say, this might make me think about something, or it triggers a thought.
Yeah.
But I like to take that and then have that conversation with the young person. And I've done that in soccer. I've done that in futsal. I've done that with individuals. I've done that with teams, just to kind of understand, like, are we going in the right direction here, or things like turning in a direction that we need to think through and change?
Makes sense.
And I think that's really important, because you have all these tools at your disposal.
Yeah, so much.
Right?
Yeah.
And you probably look at it from a variety of perspectives. You probably have far more training than any of us in the room have and you'll be able to say, well, you overlooked this. You should really be thinking about that too. For me, though, I think when the data is there and the video is there, and you combine all of that into one, you're looking at all of that over a period of time. So for soccer coaches, the way I look at it is, if I know what my match day is, I work back from that match day. Right. So if tomorrow's a match day, I'm at -1,
-2, right?
Right. But then when I get past match day, how many days do my athletes need to recover?
That's right.
It depends on their age. It depends on their physical nature. It depends on whether they're coming off injury. It depends on a variety of things, right? So I try to think of it in those terms. And that might mean that, +1, +2 are lighter, easier days that are not rigorous.
Right.
And they need to be that, because we're thinking about how to get them to quarter 4.
That's right.
And then when that season ends and they need a chance to regen,
that's right,
we want to get them back into quarter 1 with little to no injury as much as possible.
That's right. So second part to that question is, at what age? Because, we're going to talk about this, and parents are going to listen to this, and they're going to say, I need to get my 10-year-old on this data. And I'm going to say, no. Or they're going to have an older brother or sister who is 15, 16, and they're tracking this data, and they're saying, hey, we should really track your little brother. He's 9. He really needs to start tracking his GPS data. And I'm going to say, no, we're not going to do that. Even in my world, in sports performance training, we have kids that reach out to us, and this is probably bad business. You're going to tell me this is bad business. And we just say, no, we're not going to train your kid because he's too young.
Yeah.
She's too young. We're not going to measure we're not going to do an evaluation on them, because that doesn't make sense to do for an 8-year-old. All you're going to do is stress this 8-year-old out about what their force data is. That shouldn't matter at this point, right? So talk about, when do you start to implement this data?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, working with pre-adolescent youth, they should not be doing things that stress their growth plate or put them at risk of injury. Meaning, when a parent comes to you and says, my 10-year-old is this, but plays up. Right? How many times have you heard that one?
Every day.
Right?
Every day.
And I think that they can handle it. Well, my response is, can I ask them that question myself? Can I ask your son, does he think that he could handle something like lifting weights at 10? And my answer as a parent would be, there's no way I'm going to have my son lifting weights at 10 years old, because I don't want to interfere with what's going to happen when he does go into adolescence.
That's right.
It might mean that we might want to do a little bit more stretching to improve flexibility.
Yeah.
We might want to work on his ability to understand how to do that every single day, so that he's not being told to do it, but he actually has developed that as a habit.
Right.
I might think about, how can I help him improve his nutrition and his hydration and his mindfulness and things along those lines. But I think it's crazy if you're going to put your son or daughter through that type of rigorous training just to say what he can run the 40-yard dash faster than any kid in his class. Yeah. What about in relation to other sports he's playing where he can run just as fast? Does he like playing other sports? Does that help him develop cognitive skills as much as they help develop physical athletic skills? Yeah. So I'm hesitant to say that I would be a supporter of that. I don't think I would do that for my own children. I didn't do that for my own children. Yeah. So that would really cause me for concern, Chris. Yeah. I would be very, very leery of
I love that you're saying that, because I'm on board with you. And I think that, there's as the Senior Director of Sports Business Development, as somebody who runs in my own company, there's a financial responsibility that I have to my company, but there's also a fiduciary responsibility that we have to the community, right?
Yeah.
And because sports business has become such a business, you see a lot of these trainers and academies out there, and elite. Every day there's a new definition of elite, by the way, right? Like elite, okay, that's what we're calling elite now. Yeah. How do you, as a business development person, say, hey, this is a potential moneymaker for us, but we shouldn't do this. This is a grift, right? Like, how do you decide what's a good, valuable service that we can provide for kids and for families versus this is a grift?
Yeah, I would say, look, when you have different sports experiences, you want to curate that experience so that it's age appropriate, it's developmentally appropriate, it's fun, and it should be an uplifting experience as much as possible.
I love that.
So if I'm designing a curriculum for 2, 3, and 4-year-old kids to learn motor skills and to develop the ability to relate to others while doing things, that should be fun all the time. But I'm not capturing any data with that, right? I'm envisioning somebody like laser timing 2-year-olds right now, and that's like, because somebody's gonna do that right now. Somebody out there is on the internet posting Instagram reels of them laser timing 3-year-olds. Like, that's happening right now, and it's crazy to me. It is, and if that experience is not shared with the parent, it's lost on the child.
That's right.
So if you're there with your 2, 3, or 4-year-old child, they want to be as close to you as possible until you start to see them nudge away from you a little bit because they're really liking what they're doing, right? So they're learning by doing.
That's it.
Right? And that should carry through into age 5, 6, 7, 8, as much as where they start to show potential. It's not really true athletic metrics yet because they're still learning all those motor skills, all those proprioception skills, all those cognitive skills all together.
Yeah.
There's a point at which you sort of let the leash go.
That's it. That's right.
Right? And as a parent, you have to learn that. It's not easy to do it, but you have to learn eventually that it's okay to let your child fail. They can fall. They have to get back up. Right? Don't run out there and try to lift them off the ground when they've done it. Let them learn how to do that themselves.
That's right.
And then as they get to a point where data starts to present itself just a tiny little bit, then I think you can start to say, okay, yeah, it'd be interesting to see, let's just see how far you can just jump forward. Or how high you can jump. But that doesn't really mean anything yet.
Yeah, not at 10, no.
Not at 10. Maybe 13, 14, 15, it starts to mean something because now we can take that into account as you grow and develop and you gain in strength, you gain in confidence, you gain in stamina, et cetera, et cetera. But I think you got to be really careful with that at very young ages because, the fun does get pushed out.
Yes.
It becomes a little too serious.
Becomes too serious.
What happens? They leave the sport.
They leave the sport. I think you made a really good point, and I think this is a point that I want to make to parents all the time because I hear you. You're telling me that your 6-year-old really loves the game, and the truth is, it might, but what they really love is the attention that you give them when they're playing the game. They really love you. They don't love the game yet. Not at 6 years old, right? Because until you've gone through sacrificing going away to birthday parties or being with your family, until you're willing to go to sleep early, until you're willing to let go of a lot of the other things that you also love for soccer or football or basketball, you don't really truly understand what it means to love the game itself. So for the parents that are saying, I'm going to push my 6-year-old because they really love the game, no, they don't. They don't love the game. They love the attention that you give them when they play the game. Right? I think that's a very important distinction that we have to make.
Yeah. Look, I can remember when I was 5, my favorite jersey. I can remember to this day.
Yeah.
Right? You can too, right?
I can too, yeah.
Okay. And it brings about a feeling, right?
That's it.
There's a memory inside your head that brings about a feeling inside your heart. How many kids have that is not sports specific? I would say a lot. A lot of them do. Whether it's a friend, whether it's a doll, it's a picture, it's a movie, you name it. It can be anything, an animate or inanimate object. For me, when I think about that and I relate that to what I do and why I do it, it's because I love what I do. And I'm passionate about what I do. So I like to bring that out in the way that I teach. Am I always successful with that every lesson? No, I'm not. The same thing in my work. I would love to say that I can close every deal I start, but I can't. Right? And I have to be willing to be reflective on that process and that journey. but I don't forget what I love to do. I never do. So for me, I think that's a big part of, and sort of giving advice is allowing your children to develop that passion and to share it with their parents. And it might be that their parent played the sport. It might be that their parent was a very successful athlete, and now they sort of feel like my son's going to follow my footsteps because I was successful.
Sure.
It doesn't always work like that.
Yeah. So let's fast forward a little bit for the ones who do love the sport and they go through their adolescence and middle school, and they've put together the work and they've developed as players and they've earned the chance to receive offers, right? Talk a little bit about how you guide your families and your student athletes through that process of, hey, it's June 15th going into your junior year, you just got an offer. Do you just accept the first offer that comes your way? What's the decision-making process or the guide to that decision-making process that you give to those families?
Yeah, every young lady and every young man's going to be different in terms of what their talent profile looks like on the outside to what they're personally trying to achieve. And we know it changes from your sophomore year to your junior year. And of course, by your senior year, if you haven't reached that point, there's a couple of red flags to be thinking through. But for me, in working with student athletes, I ask them to really think about casting a wide net and then developing from that wide net schools that they really like, schools that they're sort of interested in, and schools that would be sort of safe choices if they had to go there. And then to think through, once they've got those buckets in place, why would I want to go to that school? If a coach asks me what I really like about his or her program, I need to be able to articulate the answer to that beyond just the sport.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're going to go to that school to study something.
Right.
So you should,
hopefully, right?
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. Hopefully. Regardless of whether you're going to end up in the NBA, the NFL, or some other professional entity.
Right.
But while you're thinking through how you're getting to that point as a potential collegiate athlete, you need to do your homework and do your research and figure out what you want to do when you're there. And so that's a big part of me working with the athletes that I have and their families, is to identify that as part of that process, because coaches are certainly judged on how many games and championships they win, but also how many student athletes graduate from their university or college, and how successful those student athletes are by GPA. That means something. You know, some schools take great pride in the fact that they have a team GPA of 3.0 or higher, or even higher than that. Mm-hmm. Some will say, our measure of success is that we have 100% graduation rate. That every year we're graduating 5 student athletes or something along those lines. So for me, like when I'm advising families to think through that just makes their dossier come to life when they're talking to the coach. Because the recruiting coach already knows everything that they need to know about you as an athlete. They've talked to your club coach. They've talked to they're not going to talk to your high school coach. We know that doesn't happen anymore. But they're going to talk to your club coaches. They're going to talk to performance coaches that are associated with you. If you're in a national team program, they're going to have done their research. They're going to have watched and scouted you.
Right.
They're also going to check you out on social media and see what you're doing.
That's right.
And that's a very telltale sign as to whether you're presenting the right person to that coach and to the people that you want to be part of a community with. And at the same time, your academic transcripts and records will state who you are as a student. But I think you've got to really think through as part of your process of research, who you want to be when you're not in uniform. And I would think coaches would want to know that just as much as they do what you're going to do when you're in uniform.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Oh, you're going to win the right back spot. Okay, great. You're going to contribute on the attacking side of the ball. Fantastic. But what'd you do off the field today?
Yeah.
Oh, you have a job. Oh, fantastic. Tell me a little bit about your day.
Yeah. Right?
Because those are the people that are usually you're going to stay for the long term.
So that's an interesting thing that you bring up, because a lot of what's happening now in college, for sure, almost every student athlete at a lot of these major schools are just doing school online. And you're starting to see that in high school too, right? Mm-hmm. For a kid that's in high school, is it advantageous for them to do homeschool or online school and just focus on their academics where they can have a little bit more control of their schedule? Or are coaches and teams and parents, or sorry, not parents, but are coaches still looking for that kid who can go to school and manage that schedule?
It's a good question. I think it's, environment is a key component to what you put into it, what you get out of it. So whether you're going to a traditional school where there's bells and whistles every single day and you go from class to class to class, and then you have athletics after school, and then you might have your club after that. It depends on how you manage your day and what you want to get out of it. Here we have, in our Performance Academy, we do have a blended learning model where students come for 4 hours of academics and 4 hours of athletics. So they complete all of that between the hours of 8 and 4 each day. That leaves their afternoon and evening to other activities, social, jobs, academic, family, religious, you name it, right? It's all there. They can pursue what they want to pursue without having to, roll around the Beltway until 9, 10 o'clock at night and then come home and start their homework and maybe not get enough sleep to begin with. So I think that's an option for everybody that's out there wants to seek it. For student athletes who have heavy travel schedules, they might, for example, today they might be in South Carolina for a particular event, but they had to leave school yesterday to travel, and their school sees that as an unexcused absence. How are they going to make up those assignments?
That's right.
How are they not going to be dinged for missing yet another day of public or private school? There are consequences and ramifications to that. Our students here take their work with them. They can manage their time ahead of travel so that they can get all of the academic requirements and assignments out of the way, or they can take their computer with them and do it while they're on the road, whether they're on the airplane, in the bus, or at the hotel. They're in the back of their mom's car, and they're still working on their assignments. That's completely acceptable, and it is a big part of how our student athletes are learning each day. That translates to time management, personal responsibility, understanding the tasks that you have in front of you each day to get done, and taking that serious. Because if you can handle that at 15, 16 years old, by the time you move into college and your college coach says to you, okay, your typical week with us is 20 to 25 hours a week of intensity training, team training, and other, how are you going to manage the rest of your day?
That's right.
If you haven't figured that out yet and you don't know what that entails, chances are you're going to really struggle. And your parents aren't going to be there to do the work.
That's right.
Right? Nobody hires your parent to take your place.
That's right.
Like, I wish we could convince parents of that, but I struggle with that.
I like that saying. So we've talked a lot about a number of different issues, and I'm gonna go back and certainly watch this video because there's some gems in there. But I do want to wrap it up with a couple of things, and then I'm going to give you a chance to kind of articulate the things that you said everybody should be able to articulate, and I think that's really important. So I want to give you a chance to do that. Before I do, you mentioned making a lot of mistakes along the way.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's something that separates an elite athlete, an elite performer. Anybody who's elite is willing to look at those mistakes and evaluate them and see what we learned from them and what can we do better. What's maybe one of the things that stands out to you is like, oh, I could have done better back then, and this is how we've addressed that, and we're doing better now.
For me personally?
For you personally, for you as the business development person, as the head of soccer at the St. James, whatever it is, whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, I would say, just in terms of professional experience, when I was younger, I was probably a lot more arrogant than I am today, and I didn't listen as much. I spoke more. I didn't take into account other people's perspectives. I thought that if I did my own due diligence and I was, factually and otherwise prepared, that I would have, a good deal of information and be sort of a credible resource. That was a mistake. A good mentor told me, make your ears as big and wide as possible because the things you don't hear are the things that affect you the most. And that was really sage advice in not only in the work I do as a professional, but as a parent and as a dad, and just as a person in my own relationships. Learning to listen, far more important than just speaking your mind.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's give you a chance to articulate. So one of the things that you said earlier in the conversation was, you believe that it's on a club or a team or an organization's, it's their responsibility to be able to articulate what it is that we're going to do for your kid and your child's development. So here at the St. James, what is it that you were responsible for? What is it that the club is responsible for? How do you articulate that to parents?
Yeah, I mean, I don't articulate it in my role now.
Yeah.
But when I was in the director of soccer role, I truly believe that you should ask those questions of the people that are going to be responsible for your son or daughter in terms of their education and their development and their holistic environment that they're part of. Ask those questions and don't be afraid to ask those questions. Have those conversations. Seek the answers out before you make a decision about what type of environment you think is best. And then ask your child to do the same thing as well. It's okay for a child to ask those questions when they're going through sort of discovery themselves, because they are the ones that are going to be doing it. And if they don't feel comfortable in that, then they're going to be living on eggshells all the time, right? And we can't walk across eggshells without breaking them. So I think that's a really important thing that any parent should seek out is tell me about what the daily environment is. Can I come watch it for myself? Can I see it? Does it look like it does right now in tryouts? No, it doesn't? Okay, show me what it looks like, because I'd like to see it. Second, who are the people that are going to be responsible for my son or daughter over the next 10 months? Will that change? Will that be constant, or will there be changes? And then third, outside of any of the competitions that we're playing in, are there other opportunities for my son or daughter to develop? Can they cross-train? Can they be part of other sports while playing this sport? Are there any penalties for them if they have to miss because of their academic requirements? Things along those lines. If you don't get clear answers to those questions, red flags.
Gotcha. So number one, the thing that you said the most was number one, what's the environment like? Number two, who's responsible for that environment? And number three, what are the opportunities that they can pursue outside of just the game and outside of the team structures?
Sure.
Love that.
And I think one of the other things too is, are the environments player-led, or are they coach-led, or are they a combination of both? I would not be in an environment that's completely coach-led.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's a red flag if you think all the answers are going to come from just the coach leading the environment. If there is a collective and trustworthy approach to peer development, peer education, adult-led training, as well as collaborative approach to creating that environment together where players lead players, coaches help lead players, teams become more cohesive. They achieve more. They love each other more.
Yeah.
They'll fight for each other. The ones that are just reliant on the coach, what happens when that coach gets sick?
Yeah.
What happens when the coach has a conflict?
Yeah.
What happens when something really bad occurs and the coach is no longer there? Does the team fall apart?
Yeah. I think even beyond that, like what happens when the coach calls you out? Because that's what a good team needs is a coach to call you out. And if it's always coach led, then you're always just going to argue with a coach.
Right.
But if it's something that's coach and player led, then everybody's holding each other accountable. It's not just coming from the coach. It's not just, oh, the coach is always pointing and singling me out. It's no. It's you had a job to do, you didn't get it done. It doesn't mean we hate you. It means we got to help you get it done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I think the other part of that is for parents, what kind of communication do they expect?
yeah.
And how regulated is that? Is that always regulated by the presence of a manager? You know, this whole concept of team manager and what does that person do and how supportive can he or she be to coaching staff and to the parents. And do the parents feel like they understand the philosophy and the vision, or does that change based on one thing, which is cost?
Right.
And cost drive where people make choices. Just before you came in, I was talking to one of our volleyball coaches today, and he was saying they lost a number of teams that are to participate this weekend in their volleyball event because of cost. And they literally dropped out the night before the event started.
Interesting.
So think about that. Like, you're preparing for a major competition.
Yeah.
Certain events take place. Parents say, you know what, we can't afford it. We're not going. How does that affect the kids that have been preparing for that event? How does that affect the coaches that have been preparing for that event? Now you have this setback.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But economics do drive the decisions a lot.
For sure. And I'm sure that's a whole nother podcast episode that you and I could get into. But I appreciate your time today.
Yeah.
Again, this is Doug Homer, Senior Director of Sports Business Development here at the St. James, and I am Chris Gores. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Player Card Show, and make sure you follow, subscribe, and like for more.